Sustainability reporting in Singapore is no longer optional under ISSB standards. A new grant is backing this shift, but reporting across Asia Pacific is falling fast. Forvis Mazar's Kiyin Lai is here to explain what this means for businesses. So Kiyin, what changes in corporate governance can we expect with the shift towards mandatory ESG disclosures?
How we looked at this is on three aspects, three main areas: the people, the policy, and the systems aspect. The people, largely, I think if we looked at how it has been driven historically, is that the subject has been driven mainly by compliance, risk, and accounting professionals, which carries a very large compliance approach without getting the right structure of people in place. With the mandatory disclosure and the global standards, became very clear that we need to now have terms of reference, very clear role description of governing bodies, even down to the skill sets of the members and the activities being carried out by these governing bodies, which could have been briefly worked on in the past. With the new disclosure requirements, it is almost structured and explicit that we get the right people into the right conversations to make sure that we discuss ESG at a strategic and operational level instead of just taking off the compliance checklist. The second thing that I think would really change or rather shift is really on policies and processes, where the mandatory changes now emphasize a lot on how governing bodies needs to manage sustainability risks and opportunities strategically, and also importantly, how major transactions or key decisions are managed through the ESG lens. I think the key word here is priorities, right? Getting past the mindset of cost or opportunities, especially in tougher economic conditions today. I'd like to draw forward a data point that we have. Forvis Mazar has recently published in our APAC C-suite barometer outlook. Over 50% of the executive staff considers ESG reporting requirements to be more of cost than opportunity. Now, with mandatory disclosure, this change can really be about shifting priorities. As mentioned, it's really, in the past, it was more cost. I think this mandatory disclosure will push this subject up the priority level for leaders. And finally, systems, right? With people, process now in place, I think what essentially we need to gel all together is really having a robust technology platform to make sure we are able to sustain the evolving, if you like, right?
You mentioned some good workarounds or recommendations earlier. Just to expound on that, how should organizations prepare for such mandate?
Interesting question. The first thing they should do is really to start with an honest and fair conviction on where they are on the sustainability journey. Has sustainability or ESG be incorporated into overall strategy and decision-making process? I like to draw upon the data from our recent APAC C-suite barometer survey. We asked leaders if their organizations is ready to publish a sustainability report. And surprisingly, as we move into mandatory disclosure, there was a decrease in leaders saying yes, they are ready when compared against 2024 and 2023 data. So really what's next and how organizations should prepare is really to assess the impact of mandatory disclosure standards on policies, process, and systems, instead on disclosing gaps within the sustainability report. Earlier, I alluded to people. Identify really the people with relevant skill sets, competency, and very importantly, interest and passion on the subject. And lastly, make sure we have a sustainable technology platform to sustain, the upcoming regulations, so the stakeholders are engaged. There are proper data collection, which increases the confidence of investors or data going into sustainability report.
Let's talk about its impact this time. How might mandatory ESG disclosures impact investor behavior and capital flows?
The impact of investor behaviors and capital flows are often associated with ESG ratings, right? More than mandatory ESG disclosure. And the general critiques faced by rating agency are often inconsistent methodologies, same set of data by one organization offering different ratings subject to methodology. With mandatory disclosure, this could have an impact on, how data are being presented. Mandatory disclosure basically pushes organizations to standardize ESG disclosure and aligning, organization with standardization industry metrics. And what this really means is organizations are now measured against baseline disclosures. Standards can be compared and contrasted. Over time, what this really means is that rating agencies or even investors like yourself, myself, right, will be able to better identify organizations that have embedded ESG into their business against those that are potentially lagging behind. I mean, the common examples I often quote is that mandatory disclosure requires you to determine the appropriate skill sets that is put in place in ESG, and especially in the environmental pillar as we talk about climate change. And not many have really elaborated on these subjects. With this disclosure, explicit disclosure requirements, I think this will become very clear and can really call out who are the people that is managing ESG and sustainability in those organizations.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Kian.
Thank you, Sis.
Once again, that was Kian Lai, Partner, Technology, Digital, and Sustainability Consulting at Forvis Mazars in Singapore. For more news, visit esgbusiness.com.